I'll begin. Right, just a few minutes ago, you heard the affirmative team present you with the case, and on the outside it looks like a very good idea, it looks like a common sense reform. But if you actually get into the nitty-gritty specifics of their plan and looking at drug courts, it's not such a good idea after all, and that's what I'm going to be doing in this speech. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at a topicality argument, some vagueness arguments, some inherency arguments, and finally 4 solvency arguments if I have time to get to that. But before we delve into all of the main arguments against their case, I would like to look at their stand for weighing this round. And we as a negative would agree with that standard of net benefits, but we would add more of a standard to it as of significant net benefits. Obviously, if the disadvantages and the benefits cancel each other out, if you only have $1.10 worth of advantages but $1 worth of disadvantages, that's not a significant net benefit, so they have to prove a significant net benefit over the status quo. I just wanted to clarify that for you, the judges, have the weighing mechanisms for today's debate round. I'm going to move on down to that argument of extra topicality. Now, what the affirmative team is, they presented you with a 2-mandate plan. The first one is expanding drug courts at the federal level, and we would agree that that is topical. It is under the resolution for federal criminal justice system. But their second mandate is increasing grants to the states. I have a couple responses to this. The first one being is that it's the state system versus the federal criminal justice system. A resolution states that the United States federal government should significantly reform its criminal justice system, and meaning only its criminal justice system, not the state system. These are 2 very different systems, and that mandate is extra topical in today's debate round and should be stricken from this round because it's not dealing with the federal criminal justice system, that's dealing with the state system. Now, my second argument under here is looking at grants versus criminal justice reform policy. Now, even if you do agree with them on the fact, even if you don't agree with me that state is not part of the federal criminal justice system, it is still funding grants, not specific policy reform to deal with the criminal justice system. It might affect parts of the criminal justice system, but it's not a significant policy change. It is just increasing grants, okay? Now let's move on down to the next argument, looking at the vagueness of their plan. And that bounces off that topicality argument as well. They're basically the 2 same arguments for their mandates. Now they use the same wording of capacity is increased. Capacity will be increased. That is an extremely vague wording for their mandates. And as the affirmative team, they have to provide a specific plan that deals with specific harms and gains specific advantages. Now, incapacity could mean, well, is that more drug courts? Is that more facilities? Is that more in-drug rehab programs? There's a lot of meanings for incapacity, increasing capacity. As the affirmative team, they have to show the specifics of their plan. If they don't show what they're specifically they're going to be doing, their case isn't prima facie, it doesn't stand on its face, and it's not a specific policy reform. The second argument here is looking specifically at those grants again. They said capacity will be increased to the states, but how much money will be given to each individual state? They said well, these grants will be increased, but how much money is going to go to New York per se? How much money is going to go to Florida? They have to show these specifics in order to prove their plan in today's debate round. Now I'm going to be moving on down to the inherency argument. Now the affirmative speaker read some evidence right before their plan that talked about how we still have all these millions of offenders who aren't eligible, but even if they were eligible, most of them would be kicked from drug courts. Margie D. Samley in 2011 said, even with the expansion of over 1 million offenders, most would still be ejected from drug courts every year. Quote, even if drug courts were greatly expanded to cover all the people in the justice system who needed treatment, between 500,000 and 1 million people would still be ejected from a drug court and sentenced conventionally every year. Even if we did expand it, then they're still going to be ejected from the courtroom. Yes, and a lot of them might not be getting these rehab programs, not because the court decided it wasn't best for them, and that they should be taking their conventional prison sentence. It's not the fact that we don't have the capacity for this. They can't solve for the drug courts making these prisoners who are going into these rehab programs, ejecting them from these programs. Even if you expanded it to the portion that they want, it would not have a significant impact on that number. That's basically an inherency and the solvency argument at the same time. Now let's move on now to those 4 main solvency arguments. And this is probably some of the main issues that we're going to be looking at in today's debate round, as well as perhaps some of the disadvantages that you're going to be hearing from my partner in a little while. But the first solvency arguments is look at what drug courts focus on. Now they might have some success rates, we'll be getting to those later on, but they focus on the people who are easiest to rehabilitate. The affirmative team illustrated in their plan how we need to focus on the people who can't be rehabilitated in prison. But the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in 2009 says, quote, Well-intended prosecutors and judges often limit entry to treatment offenders most likely to solve their own problems while insisting that harder cases go to jail at considerable taxpayer expense. Minorities, immigrants, and those with few financial resources are often unrepresented in a court for violent crimes. That bounces back off the inherency program, how judges and prosecutors, they just pick the people who don't need that most help, who can get off in rehab programs, who can solve their problem easily, while ignoring the people who need the help the most. And they're not changing anything about how our current drug courts operate, they're just expanding them. So this solvency argument will not occur. It will actually be increased if you expand drug courts. Now again from Natalia Walsh in 2011, that drug courts focus on those who need the least help. Quote, drug court money is spent on people who least benefit, for people who would be prison bound if not for entering drug court, saying could be considerable. If everyone who entered drug court was not given a jail sanction, successfully completed the drug court program, and went on to become a law-abiding resident, drug courts would be one of the most cost-effective means of working people with the drug problems who are involved in the criminal justice system. But for drug courts, this is quite simply not the case. And quote, what is the solvency argument? Just to summarize it for you, is they focus on the people who already are on the way to solving their problems while ignoring the drug addicts and the people who are in prison who need the help the most. And they are not solving for this. This is a huge argument against the affirmative team's advantages. Now let's move on down and to look at the actual percentages of success with the current drug programs. According to the Justice Policy Institute in March 2011, a high percentage of participants in drug courts fail. Quote, only a fraction of people who enter drug courts will successfully complete it. From 33 to 75% of participants will be kicked out of drug courts and be sentenced for the original offense, frequently more harshly than they would have been if they had never attempted a drug court. And quote, so no matter how many people they make this system eligible, if almost all, from ranging from 33 to 75% will be kicked out, that is not going to have a significant impact on the drug problems that our country has and that our criminal justice system has. The Drug Policy Alliance in 2011 says, quote, that drug courts cost longer sentences, and this is mainly the impact of the argument. Quote, not only will drug courts participants spend more days in jail while in drug court than if they had been conventionally sentenced, but if participants deemed failures may actually face longer sentences. And well, what this means, this is the impact. If you fail your out of prison drug rehab program under their plan, then you will go back to your original sentence. We will be paying double for those people. And now judges, they give them a harsher sentence for failure. Obviously, if you're going to use our facilities, if you're going to consume state money, and if you fail this program, we're going to give you a harsher sentence. So they're actually increasing the amount of time that people are in prison and increasing the cost to the states. Now let's look at quickly at that cost argument. They said, well, this is supposedly going to save so much money, but that's not the case. The Drug Policy Alliance in March 2011 said, quote, claims that drug courts save many thousands of dollars per participant or millions of dollars annually per drug court are misleading. Not a single cost analysis has looked at the full range of U.S. drug courts. So the evidence in their plan wasn't looking at the full range, and it is not going to save so much money as they have led you to believe. For all of that, for the extra topicality, for the vagueness, and for quite simply the fact they will not solve for the harms or gain the advantages that they have presented, I urge that you cast your ballot to the negative side.
My first question is talking about that last card you read. Could you reread that for me, please?
Claims that drug courts save many thousands of dollars per participant or millions of dollars annually per drug court are misleading. Not a single cost analysis has looked at the full range of costs of the United States drug courts.
You can keep going.
Okay, preliminary resorts of MADC, I don't know if that's a specific program, show that the average net cost benefit to society is not statistically significant.
Okay, so you would agree that that study actually looked at all the areas where you say our studies don't? Is that your point there?
What it was basically, it was saying that the studies that have been done don't look at the full range and therefore they're misleading, and then it referenced one specific area where there was no net benefit.
Okay, so you would agree that the MADCE study was done well and should be regarded as high in today's day?
I would have to see that specific study, but it looked at the MACD study and said that there was no benefit. So even if that is credible, there was no benefit.
Perfect. We'll address that in our next exchange. My next one is talking about how your longer sentences, DA.
Yes. It wasn't really more of a solvency. That was the impact of the solvency.
Okay, sure.
You can call it.
Okay, sure. Did you provide any examples of any time somebody who who went through a drug court program?
I didn't have time to read evidence, but I can provide you specific evidence saying that when they went through when they just decided to go to prison, their sentence was 2 to 4 years, but if they went through drug programs, their sentence was 3 to 6 years.
Okay, did that?
It's almost an increase of 50%.
Okay, sure. Did the evidence specify how many people that's happened to already?
I didn't get a chance to read that, so if you would like to make an argument, I can provide that.
Okay, if you could bring up specifics on
Sure,
that.
if you'd like to challenge that, that'd be great.
Sure. And the next one is talking about how we focus on people that don't need rehab.
Yes.
I believe that was your main point.
Yeah, the argument was saying that drug courts look at people who are most likely to succeed, whereas not looking at the people who have the real problem.
Okay, so who are the people that have the real problem? What are they in prison for?
I'm not sure. They might be in prison for a drug crime. I'm guessing that they're in prison for a drug crime since that's what the evidence is talking about.
Right. Okay. Okay, sure. We'll address that in our next speech. So who are, actually another question. Who are the people that we should be focusing on?
We should be focusing on the people who need the most help. The evidence was saying
who
that
are the people that need the most help?
the people who are the most susceptible to addiction. The evidence was essentially saying that the drug courts were cherry-picking their cases to people who are most likely, who are already on the way to success, instead of helping those people who have no chance of success.
Okay, sure. I get your point. That's great. Next is talking about your inherency argument.
Yes.
And you said that even if people even if it was expanded, people would be kicked out of drug courts. Could you explain that argument?
The argument is, even if you expanded it out the roof, it's not that people aren't eligible, it's that the drug courts make them not eligible. They look at their cases and say, we don't want you in a drug court program, you're going to regular.
Okay, is that what's going on in the status quo, or is that what's going on under the affirmative team plan?
I didn't have to see the evidence. What it said, you're talking about expanding it to all drug offenders, and it said, if that happened, then most of them would still be kicked out.
Okay, why would they be kicked out?
I don't know, maybe because they're cherry-picking cases and they're not looking at the ones who need help the most.
Okay, so it didn't provide warrants for that.
Well, I can cross-apply the other evidence, I don't know that.
Okay, if you can do that in the next speech, that'll be great.
Okay, that'd be great.